Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sydney, and today's video we will be talking about all of my favorite books that I read in 2022. So hey, what's up? How are you? I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me for a little bit. This is always a really fun video to film because it's really just me ranting and raving for however many minutes about all of the new favorite books that I found this year. During the first half of this video, the books that I mention aren't necessarily in a specific order. Towards the end of the video, I will get towards the more like, this might be my favorite book of the year. So stick around for that, but in the first half, again, these are all kind of loosely ranked. They could fluctuate between 10th favorite and 5th favorite, so to say. But to start off strong, I want to talk about Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This book was one of my most surprising reads of the whole year, I think. I've seen it all around, you know, everyone's been talking about Legends and Lattes, Legends and Lattes, Legends and Lattes, and for good reason. This book was absolutely phenomenal. There was no question in my mind that it should be 5 out of 5. I was nervous going into it because I didn't know if there was going to be enough action or enough stakes to keep me interested. You know, I've never read like a cozy book before, and it is advertised as like high fantasy with low stakes. So I didn't know what I was going to get myself into. And what I got myself into was absolute cozy perfection. I wish that I could read this book for the first time again. Truly. It was phenomenal. I loved it. I don't think that I agree with the complete low stakes though. There were some pretty intense scenes, I must say. And I am just so excited to see what this author puts out next. I know that we're gonna get some sort of form of a book 2, or at least more stories revolving around these characters, so I am so excited for it. This book is now pleasantly one of my favorite books. The next book I read that has found its way into my top 10 is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. This book in particular, I remember exactly what I was doing and where I was when I was listening to it. There's a good chunk of books this year that I consumed solely via audiobook because I was doing a lot of home renovations, and this book in particular, I know that I was painting trim around my windows in the house, and I always think about it whenever I see my windows. Like, I always think about this book, and it was such a great experience listening to it. I think being an ICU nurse and living in COVID and taking care of COVID patients like really made this book kind of a soft spot for me because it is dealing with a climate plague, the aftermath of one, and all of these solutions that these people came up with to deal with the climate plague in the story were brilliant and heartbreaking and so plausible and real. I really, really loved how the story was told in all of these different short stories, and I will say that this book was amazing to consume audibly because each short story had its own narrator, so you can really distinguish the different stories and kind of hear from the different main character's own voice, so to say. And I loved how at some points within the different short stories, the characters from other short stories would pop in to kind of keep this like loose tie throughout the stories, because yes, they are kind of all short stories revolving around a similar idea, but it kind of goes to show that like everything is somehow intertwined and related, just like all of us in the real world. Like our lives are somehow intertwined, and it was just really beautiful and again heartbreaking. I definitely felt closer to some stories than some of the other ones. Like my favorite one was the amusement park one, and Caleb's favorite one was about the talking pig. We both teared up at our respective favorite stories, but regardless, it was just so special. I had such a great experience with it that I had to give it 5 out of 5. The next book I just recently read, actually, and if you saw my most recent vlog where I read some of the horror Goodreads choices, then you know, but it is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This book, man, it was really, really special. In it, we're following 2 wives. One of them is a like deep sea explorer biologist, and she goes in submarines for weeks at a time to do these expeditions. And then our other main character is, you know, her wife. And we're following them after an expedition gone wrong. A trip that was supposed to be 3 weeks actually took 6 months. And in that time, our wife that was above ground wasn't getting much information. They were kind of keeping her in the dark. And when it comes to a certain point, you know, she probably thought that her wife was dead. But one day the submarine resurfaced and she got her wife back, but she wasn't who she was before she left. I mean, imagine being in a small submarine with 1 to 2 other people for 6 months, and you're in in deep sea. Like, there's no lights, there's no circadian rhythm, there's all these sea noises going on around you. Like, that's terrifying. But what's even more terrifying, debatably, is coming back to the real world and then having to try to reacclimate yourself to society. So we're following both of these stories. Leah, who is the biologist, we're following her story as she's underwater within the submarine, and then we'll get chapters from Miri, and following Miri's point of view is so heartbreaking because she sent Leah off, you know, to a routine exploration, and she comes back 6 months later a complete different person. Leah is no longer the Leah that Miri married. Leah now will hardly eat. She'll only drink water if there's salt in it. She doesn't leave the bathroom very often. She's always in the bathtub. Like, all of these things are written so beautifully and perfectly, and the juxtaposition of going from that point of view, Miri's, to going back to being underwater in the submarine with Leah, while also getting glimpses of what their relationship was before the expedition and how happy and great it was. Like, I could cry because it was so emotional and stunning. Truly, I thought that it was written really perfectly. I didn't expect this book to be on my favorite list, but it's way up there. It is for sure one of my favorite books ever now. Easy 5 out of 5. Another book that I read this year and loved so much was The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This book, let me tell you, it had me reeling so much. I'm still not completely over how much this book took over my mental space. We're following 3 main characters, well, really 4 main characters in this story. One of them, who is like kind of a lesser point of view, is the sister of a girl who went missing, and she is trying to figure out what happened, trying to find her missing sister. Then we have the point of view of a man who drinks in front of his TV and has gaps in his memory, a little girl who's not allowed to go outside, not after last time. And then another point of view is a cat who loves to read the Bible. And somehow all of these characters are related, and following this absolutely creepy, wild story. I absolutely implore you to read this book without looking up anything about it, because the reason that I love it with my whole heart is because the plot twists in this book, if you don't guess it before it happens, will truly rock your world. And I had no idea what was happening. The plot twists like literally shattered my existence. I was so caught off guard, and it was absolutely incredible. It was one of my favorite reading experiences of the year, I think. I was literally clutching my chest, clutching my pearls, because I was so surprised, to say the least. How different all of our point of views were. It was so incredible. I truly can't talk about this book in detail at all because I don't want to give you anything. If you haven't read this book and you enjoy kind of like a creepy, eerie time, go read it right now. Don't read any reviews. Don't do anything except start on page 1. I'm telling you, it was so much fun and heartbreaking, but an incredible time. Another kind of creepy style book that almost made its way into my top 10, which is still debatably one of my favorites of the year, was The Haunting of Ashburn House by Darcy Coates. The best haunted house story I've ever read. Truly so excited to continue to read this author's works because The Haunting of Ashburn House did what Home Before Dark by Rylee Sager tried to do. Truly. I stand by that statement. Another book that made it onto my list, which I was very surprised about, and it was actually my last month book club pick, was Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. This was a dark horse for me. I didn't expect it to be here. This book was truly so much fun. It follows a story where there's a small town on this island, and everyone is obviously very close. Everyone knows everybody. And years ago, there was a fire in the apple orchard, and the same night, a young girl was found dead. The person that everyone thinks that it was, whose name is August, is let go because they don't have sufficient evidence against him. And he's one of our main characters. He's one of our POVs. And then our other point of view is Emery, who always believed that August was innocent. But August ends up having to leave the island and he starts a new life elsewhere with his mom, so on and so forth, whatever. But years and years later, August is coming back to the island. A saying is, even if you move away, the island will always call you back. And he's coming back for certain reasons, right? You'll find out. But everyone on the island still thinks that he killed this young girl, right? So him coming back to the island is stirring up all these memories. There's so much drama. If you know small towns, there's like certain small town vibes. Like everyone's like gonna take matters into their own hands, and it's all very like shoot first, ask questions later type thing. So there's like a certain level of like small town drama within this book, which was phenomenal. But the thing that like really propelled this story for me and really hooked me, like I was obsessed, was the mystery thriller aspect to it. Like we're following Emery and August, and we're really trying to find out like what actually happened like all of these years ago. And not only is it like mystery thriller, but this island is magical. There is our main character Emery is basically a witch, and magic is a huge part of the story as well. So it's literally like a fantasy mystery thriller, and it was stunning. The twists, I'm telling you, I had to pick my jaw up off the ground at one point. One of them got me so good. Man, yeah, no, like I really had a great time with this story, and I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, and it definitely deserves a spot in this list. I absolutely loved it. Okay, so one of these spots in this top 10, I couldn't decide between 3 books, okay? And I'm giving you all 3. We're just gonna do it quickly, all right? Because they're all romances, and I couldn't pick just one. I couldn't do it. You can't make me. And these 3 books are Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I'm obsessed with her. Everything she writes is perfection to me. The only complaint I have about Book Lovers is that I wanted more pining. I wanted the enemies to lovers to be more enemies. I wanted that hate to simmer for a lot longer than it did. But that aside, it was perfect. It was such a fun read. So cute, so heartfelt. I definitely teared up because I'm a softie. Loved it. 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. A debatably perfect book. Absolutely stunning. I could cry just thinking about it, actually. Follows our 2 main characters who had a passionate 7-day love affair kind of when they were young. And then they're somehow crossing paths again as adults. They're both writers, and they've been writing their books to each other, but without either of them knowing. Because since their little like lovescapade, whatever, when they were young, they haven't spoken to each other since. But their books is how they've been communicating to each other, and their paths cross at this literary event, and they are now in the same city for a short period of time. They reconnect, and it is messy, it's beautiful, it's stunning, it's heartfelt, it's sad, and it's a lot, and it was great. And if you haven't read 7 Days in June, you need to, because it's amazing. And then I literally have to put this book on this list because I just think of it so fondly, and that's Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. I really appreciate this book because it's not all fun and games. It's not like a romance where it's like best case scenario or things will be okay in the end. You know, it takes a very real look at what a modern day relationship could be like. The thing that made me love this book so much is just how unflinching it is at all of the dark parts in a relationship, in addition to the high points. You know, when writing these 2 main characters, Cleo and Frank, the negative aspects to their character are not sugar-coated. Like, they're plainly talked about, which is incredible. I think it was so refreshing. Not only does it look at the individual people and how messy they are, but it interconnects them and talks about their relationships with one another, with Cleo and Frank, and with Cleo and her best friend, and his relationship with the guy that he's seen, and drugs, and all of the healthy and unhealthy parts of relationships are exposed in the worst and best ways. And I just hadn't really read a book that discussed these things in that way and to that caliber, and I just truly loved it. And the story itself, it wasn't necessarily groundbreaking or anything, but I just truly felt like the way it was written is worth noting, because it was definitely, all of these books are 5 out of 5s for me. I shouldn't have to say it every time, but like, I remember this book just hurting in really good ways though. Like, the story itself goes through really heartbreaking things, and again, it doesn't sugarcoat it. I loved it so much, and it really just holds a very special place in my heart. Well, now I'm just thinking about all the romances I read this year. Like, I loved Writers and Lovers by Lily King so much. I read that book in one sitting. It was hilarious, it was sad, it was great, but I need to focus. Reel it back in. Come back to me. All right. Another book that I read this year that I absolutely loved, I think it's debatably a perfect book, is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book, I have read fantasy books that I have said are paced perfectly, and I have never felt that way about a like literary fiction book before, because I never really felt like I had noticed that like the pacing in a book super mattered in a fiction book. I don't know why, but this book proved to me that pacing is everything in a literary fiction book as well. Like, this book is second to none in that department. We follow our two main characters as they are creating their first video game together. The way that they meet also, we follow that story as well. Absolutely great. But we follow them when they reconnect as older people and they create their first video game together, they become famous together, and then they go through trying to work together on new games, and their relationship is messy. They are mostly platonic until, you know, certain things happen, and we follow them throughout their lives. The good and the bad. One of our main characters deals with chronic pain, and that representation is really great. Some of the story is told in a video game-esque style, and I, obviously, if you know me at all, you know that I love RuneScape, and I grew up playing RuneScape, so like it was so much fun and so easy for me to imagine the gameplay aspects of this story. And it was truly so special. Our two main characters, their relationship, it was written perfectly. I would say look up the trigger warnings for this book now that I'm thinking about it before you jump into it. There are some really intense scenes, but those are the things too that happened in the book that really made me appreciate it, because the story was so dynamic. It is for sure within my top 5 of the year. It's very hard for me to not put this at the top. That's how I feel about it. I loved this book so much. And as you can tell, we're getting closer to the end of the list, so all of these are kind of interchangeable. I'm saving the final book for like, it has to be like my favorite book of the year. But again, all of these last 4 or 5 books are fighting for their lives to be in the top spot, truly. I've read some good ones this year. And that being said, the next one I want to give a spot to is Malice by John Gwynne. This high fantasy stole my heart. I would do anything for these characters. I cannot wait to continue this series. I'm so mad that it took me so long to read it because it was perfection. Very intricate, definitely a sit down and read type of book, not one to just listen to passing because there are so many characters that we're following, but they're all written with so much heart. I cared so much about every single one of these characters to a fault. I remember getting to only page 26 and realizing that this book was going to be something insanely special. And I feel like it's really rare to realize something like that early in a book, especially if the book is over 500 pages long. This is another story where the pacing was absolutely incredible. All of the little details that were talked about like towards the front of the book were slyly brought up in the end of the book as well, almost like little Easter eggs, you know, because the whole story is a journey. And realizing the little intricacies of characters or what they were trying to do and then bringing it back up in the end in very almost like secretive ways, it felt like. It was just a great reading experience. I cannot wait to see where these characters go. Okay, final 2. I can't even like talk about it. Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee absolutely destroyed me. This is the conclusion in the Greenbone saga. So it's Jade City, Jade War, Jade Legacy. And Jade Legacy shattered my existence. It was such a tremendous ending to the trilogy. The way that it was written, I felt was different from the first 2 books. The time that elapsed from the second book to the third book was a really big gap. And I loved that because then we were following the characters at a different time in their life. Like things are different for each and every one of them. And obviously it's the third book, so I can't talk about too much, but the third book really evolved the ideas from the second book like tenfold. We were in multiple parts around this world that Fonda Lee created, this rich, lush fantasy world. We were in multiple parts of it during different people's point of views, connecting things within this huge like crime family syndicate that's going on over their fight for the control of Jade and the island of Kikon. The magic system is great, but truly the star of the show are the characters. I would lay down my life for them. So many of them. One in particular. And I can't talk about it. This series really is all it's cracked up to be. It was absolutely worth the time. It was so stunning and truly just an incredibly devastatingly amazing finale to the series. 5 out of 5, obviously. And then Friends, I'm sure we know where this video is ending. The best book of the year that I read is none other than Babel by R.F. Kuang. There were multiple times where reading the story that I physically said, I don't think that I'll ever read a better book in my life. The amount of research and study and care that Rebecca put into this book is astounding. Truly, like I don't understand how anyone could read this book and not think that it's a masterpiece. because it absolutely is. The characters we follow within the story, some of them are absolutely disgusting and detestable, while others are like sweet little angels that I just want to put in my pocket and protect for their whole life. This book wasn't only stunning for the incredible story that it told, but also like what it should do for its readers. It makes you question everything. It makes you question yourself. It makes you look inside at your own prejudices or ways that you think about things, and it calls for action into changing those. And it's in such a way that is like, you can't ignore it. Rebecca does this in such a strong way while telling like one of the greatest stories I've ever read. Like I said, some of the characters are absolutely terrible people, but the ones that you're following, I at least would again lay down my life for them. And we're following them through their studies at Oxford, learning this incredible magic system. We're following them on a ship to go across seas. The political intrigue and all of the discussions that were brought to the table within this story is truly, it's a masterpiece. And this story talks about language a lot. So there's a lot of discussion on like the root words and the Latin, the history of words. There are paragraphs talking about the history of a single word, and I can't even handle the fact that I read and reread paragraphs because I wanted to understand it. I don't think any other author could make me do that. Normally, I feel like in any other story, I would have just glossed over it and been like, yeah, that's information I don't really care about, but it is so pertinent to the story. And I'm still kind of just, I think it's hilarious and amazing that I cared so much and I didn't gloss over it. I really think that that is just like R.F. Kuang's power, is her storytelling is just unmatched. The way she writes, her writing is incredible. And I can't even adequately tell you how perfect the progression of the story was all the way up to that final scene. Man, it is a lot. And when I tell you I sobbed at the end, oh boy, did I cry. Absolutely a masterpiece is what this book is. And that's it. That's 2022, guys. Those are my favorite books of the year. I think it's a pretty phenomenal list. I know you got a couple extras because I couldn't choose just 10. A couple others that I read this year that I also loved are Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, Sword of Kaigan, Skyward, Charm Offensive, and Crown of Feathers by Nikki Papretto. Some honorable mentions, if you will. That's it. That's all I have for you today. Please let me know down in the comments if any of these made your top list of 2022, or tell me about some of yours that weren't on mine. I'd love to know what your favorite books were for this year. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. I always appreciate your support. And of course, be kind to one another and happy reading. Bye.